What if one rifle made entire enemy squads believe they were facing machine guns? Before World War II changed everything, one American weapon quietly rewrote the rules of infantry combat forever. After World War I ended, something didn't sit right with military planners. The battlefield had changed, but the average soldier hadn't. Machine guns were tearing through entire units. Artillery was dominating from miles away, and yet the infantryman was still holding a bolt-action rifle like the Springfield M1903, firing one shot at a time, working the bolt again and again, and in moments that demanded speed. That delay could mean everything. And it wasn't just America. Pretty much every army in the world was stuck in the same place. Bolt-action rifles were reliable, sure, but they were slow. Painfully slow compared to what the battlefield now demanded. You could be the best trained soldier out there, but at the end of the day, your firepower was limited by how fast your hand could move. And against machine guns, that wasn't enough. So in 1919, the US Army made a decision that sounded simple, but wasn't. They wanted a semi-automatic rifle, something that could fire multiple rounds without manually cycling the bolt. Something that could give individual soldiers more firepower without turning them into machine gun crews. It sounded like the obvious next step, but here's where things started to fall apart. Because early attempts, they just didn't work. Either the rifles were too fragile, too heavy, or they jammed at the worst possible moment. Designers kept trying, testing, tweaking, and still, nothing balanced power, reliability, and practicality all at once. It was like chasing something that almost existed, but never quite worked. And that's when the real questions started creeping in. So why couldn't anyone just build a better rifle? Because the problem wasn't just the rifle, it was something much deeper. To understand that, we need to look at the ammunition itself. At first glance, the .30-06 cartridge looked like a strength. And honestly, it was. It was powerful, accurate, and deadly effective at long distances, tested out to nearly 1,800 yards. For military planners, that kind of range wasn't just impressive, it was essential. This was a cartridge built for dominance. But here's the catch. That same power was quietly becoming a problem, because every time a round was fired, it generated massive pressure inside the rifle. Not just a little kick, serious force. And in a bolt-action rifle, that was manageable. The shooter manually controlled everything. But in a semi-automatic, that pressure had to be controlled by the rifle itself, automatically, every single time. And that's where things started breaking, literally. Designers kept running into the same wall. The bolt would move too fast, parts would wear out, mechanisms would fail, and if you tried to make it stronger, the rifle became heavier, too bulky. Not something a soldier could realistically carry into battle. It was this constant trade-off: power, weight, reliability. You could have two, but never all three. And that's why so many early semi-automatic rifles just couldn't cut it. They worked in theory, sometimes even in controlled conditions, but put them in mud, rain, real combat, and everything fell apart. It wasn't just about building a better rifle anymore, it was about solving a problem that nobody had cracked yet. And that's when things took a turn. So if the problem was the cartridge, could anyone actually solve it? Because up to this point, no one had. But someone was about to step in and change everything. In 1919, a quiet engineer named John Garand walked into Springfield Armory and started working on the same problem everyone else had failed to solve. At first, it didn't look any different. Just another attempt, another design, another experiment. But then, something clicked. Instead of fighting the pressure of the cartridge, Garand found a way to use it. His gas-operated system took a small portion of the energy from each fired round and redirected it, cycling the bolt automatically. It was controlled, balanced, and for the first time, it actually worked reliably. Not just in theory, but in real conditions. The Army tested it again and again through the 1920s and early 1930s. And every time, it stood out. But just when it seemed like the solution was finally here, something unexpected happened. The Army almost walked away from it, not because it didn't work, but because they were considering switching to a completely different, smaller cartridge instead. But even after solving the biggest problem, the Army almost didn't adopt it. Why would they risk abandoning something that finally worked? The answer came down to money, logistics, and timing. By 1936, the decision was finally made. The rifle was officially adopted as the M1 Garand. And just like that, everything changed. For the first time, a major military didn't just test semi-automatic rifles, they standardized them. Every soldier, every unit. This wasn't an experiment anymore. This was the future unfolding in real time. And the timing couldn't have been more critical. As tensions rose across the world, the United States began scaling production, slowly at first, then rapidly. By 1941, nearly 1,000 rifles were being produced every single day. While other nations still relied on bolt-action systems, American forces were preparing for war with something entirely different. And here's what made it even more remarkable. No one else had done this. Not at this scale. Not as a standard issue weapon. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was a generational leap. On paper, it gave US soldiers a serious edge. Faster firing, quicker follow-ups, less exposure between shots. It looked almost too good. But there was still one problem. Having a revolutionary weapon is one thing. Proving it in battle is another, because until bullets start flying, you never really know. And then came the test. In the brutal jungles of Guadalcanal, everything changed. The Garand held up under mud, heat, and pressure. It didn't just survive, it dominated. Soldiers fired faster, stayed on target, and overwhelmed the enemy. Japanese forces even mistook the volume of fire for machine guns. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't just a rifle anymore. It was a shift in how war was fought. Germany saw the problem early. They knew semi-automatic rifles were the future, so they tried to build their own. The first major attempt was the G41. On paper, it looked promising. But there was one critical restriction. The rifle couldn't have a gas port drilled into the barrel. That single decision changed everything. Instead, designers had to rely on a complicated muzzle system. And in real conditions, it failed. Dirt, carbon buildup, corrosion. The rifle became unreliable fast. Maintenance was a nightmare. Soldiers couldn't depend on it. And in war, that's everything. They tried to fix it with the G43. This time, they used a proper gas system, similar to Soviet designs like the SVT-40. And yes, it was better, lighter, more practical. But by the time it entered production, it was already too late. Germany was stretched thin, resources were limited, factories were under pressure. Meanwhile, the United States was producing millions of Garands. Not thousands, millions. And it wasn't just Germany struggling. The Soviets had reliability issues. Japan tried copying the design, but barely produced any. Britain considered it, but never switched. Everyone saw the advantage, but no one could match it at scale. And that's the part most people miss. So while others struggled, why did the M1 succeed where all others failed? What made the Garand truly different? Because the answer isn't just design, it's balance. By this point, the advantage was clear. A soldier with the Garand could fire 2 to 3 times faster than someone with a bolt-action rifle. And not just faster, more accurately. No need to reset position, no need to break aim, just steady, continuous fire. It gave American troops a serious edge. But it wasn't perfect. The rifle was heavy, around 10 to 11 pounds fully loaded. Carrying it for long periods wasn't easy. And then there was the reload issue. You couldn't just top it off whenever you wanted. You had to either fire all rounds or eject the clip entirely. In the middle of combat, that wasn't always ideal. That's why lighter weapons like the M1 carbine were developed for support troops. And despite its flaws, the Garand could still launch rifle grenades, adding another layer of versatility. It wasn't just a rifle, it was a system. But here's the thing, even the best weapon doesn't stay on top forever. Because war keeps evolving. What eventually replaced this legendary rifle? As warfare changed, so did the need for something new. The Garand didn't disappear overnight. It kept serving through the Korean War, still proving its worth. But by then, things were changing. The US introduced the M14 rifle, a more modern version with a detachable magazine and automatic fire. On paper, it looked like the perfect upgrade, but reality hit again. The recoil was too strong in full auto. The rifle was heavy, hard to control, and in Vietnam's dense terrain, those long-range advantages didn't matter as much anymore. Soldiers needed something lighter, faster, more adaptable. That's when the M16 rifle came in. Smaller caliber, less recoil, more ammunition carried, and just like that, the era of full-power battle rifles started fading. So was the Garand outdated, or simply ahead of its time? Because even as it was replaced, its impact didn't disappear. What legacy did it leave behind? That legacy is what made it one of the most important rifles ever built. In the end, it wasn't just a rifle, it was a shift. A moment where one piece of technology made entire enemy squads believe they were outgunned. And honestly, that's what makes history so fascinating. One decision, one design can change everything. So what do you think? Was the Garand revolutionary or inevitable?